everyone. I'm Lou Moore, Chief Technology Officer at Code for America. You heard in Amanda's opening yesterday that 10 years ago, even the term civic tech was pretty niche. But thankfully, we've seen it rise in prominence a lot over these past 10 years. We've spent the past decade as a community laying the groundwork for building government technology and services through the lens of human-centered design. This is really critical work, and it is hard. We don't always take the time as a community to really reflect on and celebrate the progress we've made, usually because we don't have any time to spare. So as much as Summit is about looking forward, we thought we'd close out this event with a conversation that also reminds us of just how far we've come together. All of the people who are on stage with me were early leaders in the civic tech movement. They've been in this work for over a decade now, and they all bring the experience and the insights and the perspective that's going to help drive this movement forward. So I'd love to introduce our panel. Starting to my left, we have Mina Hsiang, Administrator of the United States Digital Service. We have Paul Smith, co-founder and CTO of Ad Hoc. Hwang, co-founder and COO of Nava. And Todd Park, co-founder and executive chairman of Devoted Health and former US Chief Technology Officer and assistant to the president during the Obama administration, and winner of the longest title award. All right. So yeah, let's start out with a question for the group. I know you all have a lot to say about. So looking back on the past decade, I'd love it if each of you could just share, a couple of the most important things that you've learned that it's important for us to keep in mind as we go forward. And why don't we start with Mina?
All right. Thank you so much, and it's so exciting to be here. So reflecting on the last decade, I've been exceedingly lucky to have sort of a front row seat to all of this. I was on the healthcare.gov team with this illustrious crew, and now as the administrator of the US Digital Service. And the first thing I want to reflect on is, it's working, guys. It's really working. We started this all with a hypothesis that relentless and consistent application of what we all know to be best practices and our talents with a tremendous amount of empathy and humility applied will change the conversation and change expectations, and it is working. The public has different expectations, and it enables other things upstream, like new policies and new capabilities. So just to reflect for 1 second, this all started, we all met, this all started with technology as an impediment, with the rescue of a technical system that was failing and impeding progress towards policy goals. And over the last decade since then, we have had sort of a relentless march of better and better best practices. In the last 2 years, just that I'm deeply familiar with, we have had a COVID vaccine site and a COVID test site, each of which had a soft launch. And then in the first week of being live, could support tens of millions of users per hour at times, so that we could enable testing and vaccinations across the country. The VA now has a mobile application, a native mobile application with almost 80,000 5-star reviews, an average review of 4.8 stars, and over 1 million users. We consolidated suicide prevention hotlines across the country into a more simple user experience. Who would have thought that technology consolidation could have been successful, and at the same time raise service levels by over 50%. So just like a relentless series of consistent wins by this community has really helped. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, right? Sometimes in the moment you're fighting the battle, but the relentless consistency and building has changed the expectations of policymakers, of our colleagues across the ecosystem, and it really has enabled all of us and the policymakers to have a new perspective. And the one thing I say as we're looking forwards is it also has changed what we have to do as an organization. So we're no longer a little startup like fighting to rescue 1 or 2 things. It really changes the type of problems we need to take on.
I just wanted to take the opportunity that this particular group of people is all together really quickly, kind of getting the band back together in a way, to celebrate the success of healthcare.gov. I mean, that was not a given at all when we first encountered it. And I think that's something that this community should really celebrate. Healthcare.gov is boring now. We just take it for granted. It works, and it enrolls tens of millions of people in healthcare every year. And that's a major, major accomplishment for civic tech and gov tech, and as well as for the people that it serves and the public. But I think this entire community should feel proud about that. I want to echo Mina talking about, she mentioned the COVID tests.gov website, also the federal student aid forgiveness site. You know, you can put the policy part of that aside for a second, but just focus on the technology delivery. Think about it, those were two sites that had very low expectations prior to their launch, I think that's fair to say. Or some healthy skepticism, maybe you should put it in the public, that, hey, this is another high-profile launch in a time of crisis where it's a national rollout. And both of those systems did exceedingly well. And I think there's a lesson for this community, which is that simplicity is key and matters almost more than anything else. And that's simplicity at the user interface level, at the implementation, the design, architecture, cloud technology stack layer, as well as the policy to not have a laborious enrollment process or eligibility process. So I think we can't do enough to pick over the bones of the success of that corpse as lessons for this community. A glorious corpse. And then the other thought I have about what we've learned in the last 10 years is to the point of, think about the founding of this movement, that foundational document in post USDS, the Digital Services Playbook. Amazing document, amazing foundational document. And if you think about all the plays that are in there, design for the user, cloud, agile, all of those things are table stakes now for the most part. Maybe we wish they would be further along in some areas, but you see them in procurements, you see them being spoken by agency leaders. It's sort of given now that a lot of that is just the case. But I want to single out one thing that I think we still need to make a lot more progress on, and that is procurement. It's not, and there's maybe a reason why, and there's maybe, I think, a reason why it hasn't progressed as quickly as some of those other aspects. But to Mina's point about we're no longer a startup. We're sort of in our mid-stage evolution as a community. And if we want to continue to make progress and tackle the bigger and larger challenges that we still have, the larger IT systems that are in government, and really fully transform government into a digital service delivery organization, then we have to keep going on procurement. Because while we've made a tremendous amount of progress on digital services in the last 10 years, if you look at the big pie of spending on IT and government, it still, frankly, looks a lot like the status quo ante before 2013.
Teenage problems.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Lou, and just +1 to every, Todd said there would be a lot of +1ing. I'm feeling all of those comments deeply. I'll say from the Nava perspective, I think over the last 10 years now, the team, I feel like we've really, truly had the privilege of being able to work alongside so many federal and state and even local level partners. So I think in terms of some of the things that I've been reflecting on, in addition to many of these comments, I think something I expressed to the team last year is that we are a young field. We are a young field, but we are a young field with old roots, right? And that there is a depth of institutional knowledge, there's a depth of practice history that we are plugging into, but we are not creating from scratch, right? That we have so much, that folks on the Nava side, that we have learned so much over the last many years from the caseworkers, the field office workers, the program operations staff, the folks on the policy and regulatory side of things who have been at these problems for decades, right? And someone mentioned earlier around IRS. IRS has been thinking about free filing for years, right? So, you know, reflecting on the depth of the history and the conversations that we are entering, recognizing that the ideas that we are bringing to the table are not necessarily new, right? So the ideas exist in the space, exist in these agencies, exist in these field offices for what can be better, how things can exist. But what we can bring is capacity. What we can bring are skill sets or practices or ways to help folks get from 0 to 1 or 1 to 700 million or 1 to a billion, right? So that's something I've felt very deeply, and I think the team feels really strongly about, is that reflection. And I will say, you know, again, like in terms of celebrating the wins or this kind of getting the band back together, I was reflecting also a little bit on the headlines that we have not seen over the last 10 years. And I wrote a few down. So if you'll engage with me in this speculative fiction. There's a lot of challenges, right? There's a lot of issues and challenges that we face in the space, but I'll just wanted to give you an example of some headlines that we have not seen that I felt like would have not made some of these conversations we're having today possible. Headline: Massachusetts paid family medical leave legislation rolls out. The backlog continues to grow. Call centers are overwhelmed, right? It's not a headline we've seen. COVID test applications forms take hours to fill out. Proofing requirements are causing millions of tests sitting on the loading docks, waiting for distribution, right? Healthcare.gov open enrollment period is starting soon. Administration's annual call for a tech surge. I know, traumatized. Annual call for tech surge begins. You know, and I think the fact that these, like, I think we can celebrate the wins are quiet in this space. The failures are loud. So this community, this space, like how we can celebrate these milestones, the things that have not happened due to the work and the time and the institutional knowledge in this space, that's something I deeply appreciate.
Well, +1 to everything that my dear friends have said, and I just feel overwhelming joy to be back with y'all and back here in 3D with all of you. So thank you everyone for gathering here. And so I'm back to being a civilian healthcare tech entrepreneur for the last 6 years. And so all of my observations are a bit dated. Healthcare tech's adjacent to, but not civic tech. I haven't been in the trenches for a while, right? But just just reflections from the, I guess, the early part of the decade we're talking about, and key points that are additive to everything you just heard, right? So first is that working on open data initiatives, working on with amazing people, the creation of the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, working with incredible people on the rescue of healthcare.gov, working with incredible people on the creation and development of the U.S. Digital Service and other efforts. A couple of insights. One is that it was incredible to experience and witness and marinate in the magic of taking folks who were both from outside traditional government and inside traditional government, both groups being amazing with incredibly complementary expertise, knowledge, skills, to take these two amazingly awesome groups and to merge them together into a molecule that could get extraordinary things done. So to see that magic happen over and over again was just incredibly inspiring. I think the second thing was that the single most important energy source for this molecule of awesomeness, kind of analogous to the rounds of financial capital, right, that one raises for a private sector startup, right, are the most powerful energy source is political capital in civic tech. And that you kind of think of every change initiative in civic tech, every change effort as a startup, really, right? powered by, inevitably, a really small team, right, which has all kinds of diverse skills and experiences. And that startup essentially raises successive rounds of political capital as it grows. And that political capital is key. And that if you actually have a molecule of awesome like I described, and if it actually has the air cover of the people in charge, that molecule can engender change that is truly incredible. And so those are a couple insights. And then the one final insight is that, it's extraordinary what's been happening, as Mina said. And to see all kinds of stuff sprouting and mushrooming. I mean, I remember actually the point, it was actually pretty early in the last decade, where I, who am a super fan of civic tech, okay? Like, I'm a super fan of like civic tech and Star Wars. Like, so I just follow all of it. And I literally, this was early in the decade, I literally stopped being able to track all the civic tech initiatives and efforts everywhere. Like, there was a point where you literally could, if you were a super fan, like, but now, like, you can't. Back in the day, you couldn't, and now you really, really can't, right? And I remember thinking, okay, well, this is the point at which this has become a movement, right? Because a movement has no single leader. A movement has no single thread. A movement is a tapestry of threads from all points of the compass of dream and struggle and people working from their heart and their mind, their spirit from a deep place in a mushrooming field of awesomeness. And that's what this has become, a movement. And I'm in awe of everyone in this room. And I'm in awe of all of our colleagues and spirit sisters and brothers across the country. And it's so incredibly powerful and moving to witness all of it.
Definitely got to join in all the plus oneing. Thank you so much for all those insights. And I think now let's turn towards the future a little bit. So as you think about the future of civic tech, curious what worries you the most and what excites you the most. Let's start with Mina again.
Go again. I didn't think about how if we do a cycle, I still have to go after Todd Park. So plus ones to all of that. I think so many things to be excited about and so many things to be, frankly, like it's a big challenge to be a movement, to be in the process of becoming or striving to become, frankly, the mainstream, right? If we really want to shift into the next gear, that requires being able to take on mainline contracts. It requires being able to build teams within every agency that are capable of collaborating with contractors, nonprofits, and sort of working directly with users. All of that is the next phase. It's hypergrowth. It's the next phase of the movement. And what I think about, what keeps me up at night, frankly, is mean regression, right? How do you move into that gear and retain the energy, retain the willingness to continue to do the right thing even when it is hard, retain the willingness to do the things that are not what the rest of the organization expects you to do, and push to say, yes, we need to talk to users even though it will extend our timeline, even though it's hard. We need to include different demographics even though it'll make our launch more complicated. All of the things that we all know are the right things to do and the energy that it takes, but applying that as you get bigger and as you become more central and as, frankly, like a lot of these things that we're talking about, they feel risky to people who don't have the experience to understand that, in fact, it is less risky to take these approaches, right? And so if it feels risky to those leaders, how do we continue to make it so that we can help show the way and help everyone take those on? So the thing that I worry about is mean regression, and the thing that will prevent it is the energy and expertise and application of everyone in this room and everyone across the movement in collaboration. The other thing I'm excited about is putting ourselves out of business. I am incredibly excited for this to also become Not everyone here, obviously, just USCS. And I hope my comms people are like,
Breaking news here.
breaking news. It's not tomorrow, it's not in 10 years, but I am incredibly excited for the day when every agency and every organization understands from its own organization how to implement excellent technology, how to build things, how to be strategic and thoughtful about how technology supports mission and implementation. And they don't need, you know, a little random team of folks like us, but instead this is just the way things are done across communities, across all levels of government. I'm really excited about that.
So as a software engineer by training who's spent a lot of time in operations, my default mode is cautious pessimism. I feel very paranoid about the systems that I work on and operate because I'm worried about that event that I didn't anticipate that's going to take us out, or just making sure that we've done everything we can to ensure success. And so what worries me is not that we'll repeat a mistake like the initial launch of healthcare.gov, because I don't think the advances we've made in the intervening times will be meaningfully regressed on. I think certain of those things now we do take for granted, and we will not repeat that mistake. But I am a little worried that there will be possibly another healthcare.gov style launch or system failure in the future. And what I specifically mean by that is, to me, what the failure of healthcare.gov launch was a mismatch between the public's expectations for what technology could do and what the government's ability to deliver was. It was that mismatch that was the fundamental failure. So I think that could possibly be repeated unless we are very vigilant about where our users are, where the public is with their expectations, what technology can do for them, what they've come to expect from government services that are delivered through digital channels. So I think we need to stay we need to update our priors continuously. I think we need to be in a default mode of continually learning new skills and evaluating them for what value they can bring to government. And think about something that we're all talking about, right? Something like AI, large language models. Regardless of how you feel about that personally, the fact is that big tech is all in on that stuff. So that means that in a few months, it's going to start showing up in products. It's going to start changing the expectations that all of us have for technology. And that's going to trickle down to government. And I wish it wouldn't trickle down. I wish government would lead and set new bars and new expectations for what user experiences and user interfaces and service delivery can do. But the fact is that's kind of the vanguard of where user experiences are right now. So I think we all need to, regardless of how you feel about it, start to update our priors about that and move forward. But that said, I am excited nonetheless, because we are maturing as a field, and we can take on bigger and bigger challenges. And the final frontier is really the full digital modernization, transformation of government. Government, whether it acknowledges it or not, is a digital service delivery organization. It is a digital enterprise. And there's still a tremendous amount of work to do, and I'm excited that we can do that. We can build systems that are maintainable, flexible. We know that the pace of change, the pace of policy change is very rapid, is getting faster. And I think we can take everything that we've learned and pour that into designing systems that can be changed rapidly and can be improved and can reach users where they are more effectively.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will say, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I like that frame of the expectations and aspirations versus the ability to deliver. But I would argue, actually, I mean, before, I have worries and excitement as well, but I would shout out, there's a panel, I think, later, or a session later about the work that's happening on the CDC side of things, I do think there's an incredible, there is a real opportunity for the government to be setting that bar in terms of service delivery, in terms of data transformation, in terms of integration, in terms of working with that community of communities. So I would just like shout out that team, that work doing that critical work. In terms of things that worry me, I think some things I've been reflecting about as we've been talking. Something that deeply worries me is frankly, ossification. Is the idea that the soft tissue in this space can turn into bone. And what I mean by that is that all of us, the folks here, like this was not part of the plan, right? I don't know if this was on any of our like 10-year career plans to be involved in healthcare.gov or support this kind of rescue effort, right? So my worry or my concern is that moving forward, that the folks in this space, the organizations that have been built, the organizations that are being built, the teams that are being formed, that we kind of forget where we came from. We start thinking about the hard boundaries of our organizations. We start thinking about zero-sum types of moves between organizations, and we forget of ourselves as a coalition or as a movement or as this kind of loose set of folks who have ultimately many more shared values and shared goals and shared outcomes than divergent ones. So that's something that really worries me, is that as we mature, that we ossify, that these boundaries get built up. And one of Nava's values is progress takes work. It doesn't come for free. And what we mean by that is that this work is difficult. This work can be messy. Coalition building can be difficult and messy, but it is worth it. Right? So I'm amazed by this community. That's my concern, is that we forget that we forget the type of collaboration that can happen, that we forget the roots of where we came from, and that we start playing this kind of winner-take-all type of game. Yeah, thank you. In terms of, yeah. I know, I'm looking at the time. In terms of what excites me, quite frankly, I'm incredibly excited on the other hand about there are such, like, as Todd, you were saying, like there's such, and I don't think you've left, actually. I feel like what you're doing at Devoted is deeply involved in the service, the kind of continuation of the service delivery that the government is providing. But I would say, like, what is exciting to me is there are so many more durable and sustainable paths for engaging in this work that did not exist 10 years ago, right? That is deeply, deeply exciting to me. And I'll just say something that was profoundly powerful to me yesterday, and I want to speak to you, is every single one of you that raised your hand yesterday, that this was your first time attending the summit. That's you. I am excited about all of your presence here. I shared a quote last night. I'll try to share another quote. I was attending a panel about ball and house culture, and someone asked, if you don't know about this kind of ball and house culture, someone asked, like, what was the legacy that Madonna's Vogue video had on ball and house culture? And Dominique Jackson said, I know. Dominique Jackson, the legendary Dominique Jackson, yeah, hell yeah. Dominique Jackson was very demure on this panel, and she said, legacy is not made by those who come and leave. She said, legacy is made by those who come and stay. So that's my message to every single one of you that raised your hand yesterday, that this was your first time. Come and stay, okay? This is a real space. Real work can happen here. So thank you.
Well, a +1 again to what all of my dear friends said. I think the thing I would add is that it is increasingly vital for what my great friend Megan Smith calls TQ, tech expertise, knowledge, savvy, right? To actually suffuse not just all of government service delivery, but all of government, period, right? I cannot think of one major domain of government or minor domain of government, right, where you don't need TQ, right? Domestic policy and action, labor policy and action, economic policy and action, international policy and action, national security policy and action. All of them need TQ, right? Not because tech has all the answers. It most certainly does not. But it is a thread you have to weave into the tapestry of understanding and action on all of those fronts to even ask the right questions, let alone come up with the right answers, right? So I am terrified of a future where TQ does not suffuse all of government. I am incredibly excited by a future where TQ does suffuse all of government. And it is this movement that gives me hope that the arc of the path forward bends toward awesomeness. So thank you. God bless you all, and stay. You're right, I have stayed.
Yeah.
And let us stay together. Let's rock on and bend the arc of the universe toward awesome.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you all. That brings us to time. So just want to close by thanking all our panelists. Thank you for your service. It's been amazing to be part of this journey as a community together. Thank all of you for joining us for Summit. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.